Okay, Derek, if there was one statement you could give me about the climate crisis, what would that be?
Let's change the conversation. Yes, climate change is here, it's urgent, and the challenges are immense. But in responding to these challenges, we can find the path to long-term economic prosperity and well-being. Climate action is not just good for the planet, it's essential for business success. There's increasingly a movement happening, a race to zero carbon emissions. It's not just about competition, but about collaboration. Imagine a future where businesses don't just survive, but thrive by embedding sustainability into their core. A future where innovation and growth are also rising to the challenge of climate change. This future is within our reach when businesses come together to drive systemic change. As business owners, entrepreneurs, CEOs, you have extraordinary power to influence policies, practices, and norms and build a sustainable, emissions-free economy. But we need you to get involved, and we need to focus the conversation on solutions. Join the growing movement of business leaders committed to advocating for climate solutions and driving change. Get access to information, resources, opportunities for action, and a powerful network of leaders like you dedicated to a more sustainable future. Learn how we're not just reshaping commerce, but we're changing the business landscape for a more sustainable future. We're BizforClimate. Sign the Climate Action Pledge today and declare your support for climate action. Hello, and welcome to today's webinar to talk about Manitoba's roadmap to net zero. So the government of Manitoba is developing a roadmap or a strategy to get us to this thing called net zero by the year 2050. So this is a key strategic framework that will help shape our economy and our communities. And so the government is seeking input right now, and the consultation period for public and business input is open right now. So we have a window of opportunity to provide some input into this strategy, and this is what brings us here together today. So my name is Derek Earle. I'm the founder and the leader of BizforClimate. I'd like to invite all of you who are joining to feel free to drop a line in the chat, maybe say where you're from or which organization you're with. We'd love to hear about that and have you involved in the chat throughout the day. A little bit more about me. My background prior to this work was in international trade and investment and export promotion and economic development. And I was really working with businesses right across the province and in all different sectors. But for about the past 10 years, I've pivoted and taken a much deeper dive into understanding this issue of climate change. Personally, it's an issue that started to push my buttons, and I got motivated to get more involved and understand the challenges facing us and what the solutions could be. And professionally, I saw this touching every aspect of business and the economy, and we really need to be better prepared. So since then, I've been working and founded this organization, Biz4Climate. We've helped bring together a network of companies and business leaders that are committed to tackling this issue head on. In addition to this work, I've been participating in a stakeholder advisory group to the Task Force on Net Zero Policy, which is organized under the United Nations. It's an international working group looking at these questions of net zero policies in different markets and internationally. And recently, pleased to say, I've been appointed to the Expert Advisory Council to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change here in the province. So it's definitely a topic that's being taken seriously and being looked at very closely, which is why we need to provide some input. And just as we get started, I would like to start off in a good way with our land and treaty acknowledgement. And so we, as the board and the team at Biz4Climate, respectfully acknowledge that BizforClimate's headquarters here in Manitoba is located in Treaty 1 lands, original lands of the Anishinaabe, Ininiwak, and Sininewek, Dakota Yate, and Dene, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. I also note that northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are ancestral lands of the Inuit. We are also a federally incorporated organization and so we therefore recognize and affirm the Indigenous and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples across Canada in their respective treaty territories and in their unceded lands. So part of our work involves acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past, and we commit to building new relationships based on respect, the people and the treaties, but also the lands and the waters and the air that sustain us. And so as an organization, we've committed to and adhering to the principles of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And as we do this work focused on climate change, we're really very mindful of the ways that climate change intersects with Indigenous communities. So we believe the path forward, must begin on a foundation of truth and reconciliation. And this really brings us back and ties into our topic today. In thinking about what it means to develop a net zero roadmap for the province and how we're going to simultaneously reduce greenhouse gas emissions and respond to climate change and build and maintain a competitive economy, we must remain very vigilant and proceed carefully so that in our rush to respond to the urgency of these challenges and unlock a clean economy, we're not repeating the same harms and mistakes of the past. So as we get started, this is today's agenda. I'm going to have a few more introductory remarks, and then we're going to shift into hearing from my colleagues and our presenters today to provide some context about why a net zero roadmap is important to us and it matters to business and the economy. We're going to have a bit of an overview or a net zero one-on-one to kind of unpack some of the key concepts and provide some core definitions of what does that look like. And we'll touch on the public engagement process itself in terms of the how-to go about responding to this. And from there, open Q&A. So that'll be your time we'll come back to questions at that point. Ask your questions via the chat. You can see we've got a poll that's just come up now. So there will be some polls along the way, and we can discuss that in the Q&A period at the end. But I'll just carry on and get started with a brief introduction. So we're starting from the premise of climate change being an urgent issue, an important issue that we feel is very important to keep on our collective agendas. But we also understand this as a systemic issue. It is a big, complex global issue. It brings a whole new state of risks and challenges to us, whether those be physical, extreme weather. I know in here in Manitoba, we've been all dealing with the wildfire smoke, which is a symptom. And what we call transition risk, which has to do with the way that climate change is shaping and transforming markets and policy and infrastructure and the investment landscape. And those are all issues that matter to business. And there's also the opportunity side of how do we ensure our companies are fit for purpose in a low emissions and net zero world? And where are those opportunities to capture value and remain and be competitive in the economy going forward? So those are key questions that we're interested in. When we talk about climate change with business and climate action for business, I like referring to this 4-pillar approach. And it's an easy framework to understand. So pillar number 1 is about what can you do as a business to reduce your own carbon footprint or your own greenhouse gas emissions, your operations, your energy use. Number 2 looks a bit broader at your supply chain. And up and down your supply chain of that life cycle of your product, which is in fact where many of the cumulative emissions and environmental impact are found. 3 is about what products and services do you have, and do you have solutions that you can deploy into the marketplace to help us on this transition, to help others decarbonize, to help us be more competitive and more energy efficient and use less resources, and help us build that economy in the future. So how do we scale up those market opportunities and help companies on that journey? And number 4, what impact are we having in society? So what impact how are you using your voice and your influence and your clout as a business owner to have a positive impact on this issue and to speak up and call for and ask for the types of policies we need to help guide us and get us there? That pillar number 4 is very much a part of what BizforClimate focuses on and how we can mobilize that collective voice to tackle the systemic issues. And what today's opportunity in providing input into the net zero roadmap is all about as well. So we're BizforClimate. It's all about bringing together a network and a coalition of businesses that are committed to helping us champion climate action and keep this issue on the agenda. We'll do this by raising awareness, by providing education, by doing more and more advocacy on this issue, and providing forums and opportunities for you as business owners to help advocate for the solution and contribute. And we're building a very unique network of companies committed to climate action and sustainability, very like-minded and purpose-driven network. And there'll be opportunities to meet with and interact with this network as we go forward in our programming. A key initiative that has helped us organize this to date is through our Climate Action Pledge. And so we've been inviting companies to sign on to this pledge, to embrace the principles of what we're talking about, and declare your support for climate action. And it's a way to help promote awareness around this issue, to demonstrate that this is an issue that business cares about and are involved in, and to broadly help us advocate. And we've been able to already take that message and build relationships at the government levels, and build relationships within the community and tell that story. And we're growing. Pleased to report we have 243 companies now signed on to our Climate Action Pledge. And that's something that's really never been done here in Manitoba, to bring companies together like this around this issue. And the message is resonating, and it's continuing to grow and attract more interest. And at the same time, we're evolving as an organization. We're really moving into a new phase of action and impact. And so you're going to see more sessions like this where we're providing information, doing webinars, and bringing opportunities for you to use your voice to weigh in and have an impact. So enough for me. I now get the pleasure to introduce the team to help us go through the next parts of our agenda. So I'm joined by a few key team members, and I'll introduce them in more detail as they come up to make their presentations. But you'll hear from Chris Evans, who are Director of Policy and Engagement, Dee King, to talk about the how-to and the process in the role of our Director of Operations and Communications. And I'm going to turn first to my colleague Quentin Chambers, who's going to provide some context for us into this issue and why net zero matters. So Quentin's recently joined as a board member of BizforClimate. He's an investment manager and financial planner at Scotia Wealth, with over a decade of experience working with Manitoba businesses, business owners across almost every sector. So his work spans a full spectrum of wealth management, but with a real specialization in factors like ESG, climate policy, and economic shifts that influence our competitiveness, our access to capital, and our long-term business growth. Quentin brings grounded perspective on how the transition to net zero intersects with the reality of running and investing in Manitoba businesses. So with that, we'd like to welcome Quentin onto our stage here and invite you to come bring some remarks.
Well, thanks for that, Derek. So hello, everyone. I am happy to be here on behalf of BizforClimate today. Now, I want to start with the conversation of Manitoba's net zero roadmap is so important. And I want to stress that today isn't about your company's specific net zero initiatives. Instead, it's about how we as Manitoba's business community come together to help shape provincial policy. And this will inevitably guide the transition going forward. As we all know, policy sets the rules of the game. And if those rules are set without our input, they may create costs without creating the equivalent opportunities. So to illustrate, I'm going to talk about the company Nutrien, which is known as the largest fertilizer company in the world. When the federal government set the target of reducing emissions by 30% by 2030, Nutrien had to respond. They began developing lower emission fertilizers, investing in carbon capture technology, and working with farmers to cut nitrous oxide emissions. This policy did not just change one rule, it reshaped how products are made, how farms operate, and so how suppliers can win contracts in the global market. So I believe these dynamics are here in Manitoba, and they fall into three buckets that every business leader understands. First, it's going to be about risk management. Just like how Nutrien faced the risk of losing market access if they did not adapt, Manitoba businesses also face risk from rising carbon costs, new compliance requirements, and shifting supply chain expectations. Poorly designed policy raises costs and reduces competitiveness. Then on the other side, we have opportunity creation. Nutrien's example shows how policy changes can lead to cleaner products, new technologies, and stronger global positioning. Here in Manitoba, we have some unique advantages. like affordable hydropower, world-class agricultural base, and growing innovation in clean tech. Good policy can unlock these opportunities and help businesses lead, not lag. And then we have access to capital and competitiveness. Around the world, investors and lenders are moving capital towards companies with credible sustainability strategies. Nutrient Shift was not just about compliance. It's about how we stay attractive as global investors. For Manitoba companies, alignment with net zero initiatives will determine how easy it is for them to access capital, win customers, and recruit top talent. But there is one more piece to all of this. And this roadmap has the potential to set the stage, and it all starts with your voice. Now, when it comes down to this roadmap, it's going to influence investment and provincial policy for years to come. And if the Manitoba business community weighs in, we'll be able to help shape with our perspective. And that can mean, ideally, more benefits than cost. Again, it's so important to emphasize that with BizforClimate, that we're here to bring everybody to the table by actively shaping solutions that are practical, profitable, and sustainable. Now, I want to close with this. Manitoba is at a crossroads. We can treat net zero as an obligation, or we can treat it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reinvent our economy for the better. If we approach this together with both business sense and climate sense, we can leave our province stronger, more competitive, and resilient for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Quentin. Really appreciate you being with us to bring some opening remarks. And a reminder to everyone, there will be Q&A after each of the brief presentations, so a chance to weigh in on that, save your questions or add them to the chat as we go. So now I'd like to turn it over to Chris Evans. So Chris is an organizational leader with over 15 years experience in engineering, policy, and management, and has worked at that interface of economic development, climate change, and sustainable finance. He brings nearly 10 years experience working on both domestic and international climate change through various senior and executive roles with the federal government. And in the past was a consulting manager at ICF International, advising public, private, and international organizations on climate and energy issues and ESG strategies. He also has a master's from MIT. So again, currently working in the role of Director of Policy Engagement at BizforClimate, and to bring us some insight on Net Zero 101.
Great, thanks very much, Derek. And actually, thanks both to you and Quentin for a great intro to this session. I think really establishing sort of the context around net zero, climate change, and really why this matters for business. I think really well driven home, Quentin. So I didn't wear a jacket today because we're going to roll up our sleeves and dive into a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of net zero road mapping, really as it relates to what Manitoba is doing, which is this provincial level roadmap, which I think Quentin really drove home the differences there. Around road mapping, it's true in many things in life, but I really like the saying that a vision without a plan is just a hallucination, and that really is where road mapping comes in. So what I want to cover today, and I'll bring up some slides here, is a bit of just some foundational concepts around net zero road mapping. I do see there's a fair level of awareness about this in the room, but then really go through some of the key elements of road mapping, the best practices, the current state of art of what makes a good roadmap, and then finally some of our recommended actions and key messages for businesses to engage in the current consultation process. So I think it's really important just to start with a simple model to explain why net zero matters. It's not rocket science, but the term gets thrown around a lot. And so it's really useful just to start out to explain why net zero is the target that we need to seek in these types of plans. A simple model here, you can think of the atmosphere as a bathtub, and you can think about carbon in the atmosphere as the level of water that is in the bathtub, for example. Through human history, the water level has remained relatively constant. There is a cycle, a natural cycle of carbon into the atmosphere and out of the atmosphere through natural processes. Those are in balance, so the level has remained roughly the same while we've been around on this planet. What humans have done through, the advent of fossil fuels is we've turned on that tap. So the flow in is greater now. There's an imbalance. The natural processes no longer are equal. And so the water level is rising, and we are indeed seeing now the impacts from too much water in the bathtub through climate change. What we need to do collectively is turn the tap off increasingly, so that we reestablish that balance, and that balance is net zero additions of water into the bathtub or carbon into the atmosphere. And until the key thing about net zero is until we reach that net zero point, even if we're reducing emissions, the water level keeps rising, and we will see more severe impacts of climate change. That's what the science tells us. So really important to kind of understand that underlying concept. So then what then does a net zero roadmap mean for us? Seems like there's a fair amount of confidence around what this means for a business. It's really a strategic plan that outlines, how we are going to move from the current state of increasing water into the tub to that net zero equilibrium. And what's important about Manitoba, and Quentin made this point really well, is that it's a much broader scale. It's not that different from the elements of a roadmap for what Manitoba is doing are not that different from necessarily what a corporation or an entity might do. What's different is the scale that it applies at and the different actors that they need to align in that process for it to succeed, which is much broader, right? So you can think of it like, highway, like the individual companies and actors that are trying to move to net zero, or the EVs that are on the road. And what Manitoba is doing more is building what looks like a lot more like the highway, right? That's going to direct where everyone is going and how fast they can get there. So if you've got a good plan, people are going to get where they want to go. If you've got a poor plan, you just created a traffic jam, and that's obviously something we want to avoid. So underscores the importance of this effort. Want to turn to then what are sort of a bit more of the guts, the nuts and bolts around net zero road mapping. And this is based on an existing body, like an evolving awareness and state of art around how to do this. We are collectively getting better at road mapping. We're learning from our mistakes. We're identifying what works well. And so it's really important to be, incorporating that as we go forward with these efforts. One thing we've learned from the start is that just setting an aspirational goal isn't sufficient. Doing what a roadmap is trying to do, which is really decouple economic growth from emissions, is really hard. It's hard to do. It's not easy. And so setting that target is not going to align people enough or drive enough action to really achieve the change you need to see. The way that you do it is you set increasing interim milestones through time towards the target, that the net zero timeline you want to hit. And those milestones need to be informed by what the science is telling us about how quickly emissions need to reduce to avoid severe impacts of climate change. That's what we call a science-based target. The pathway also needs to be informed by an understanding of the technologies and solutions that are going to be applied, on what timeframes they can be applied, how effective they're going to be at reducing emissions, and at what cost. With those pieces, you have a very clear, attainable, credible pathway to your target, and that's really what's needed to align effort, investment around it. Also really important to look at full emissions, recognizing that the emissions that you direct in your jurisdiction, say a province, or even, for corporate, an organization, decisions may affect up and downstream emissions. So a credible plan will look at those different emissions. There are other emissions outside of carbon as well, other greenhouse gas emissions that are important to consider. So, a credible plan will look at that as well. And then implementation mechanisms really are what separates, in some cases, a good plan from a hallucination. Looking at, are there resources behind the plan, people an organization that rests behind there to implement the plan, and also looking at governance mechanisms. Do the different actors that have a role or control certain levers that are important for the plan's success, do they have a mandate, and are they going to be held accountable to align their own engagement behind the plan? These are really important elements of success, and it can really make or break a roadmap. Other areas that are important: stakeholder engagement, ensuring there are mechanisms for getting input from all the relevant parties. Very important, particularly in a public, broader government road mapping exercise. And then finally, very important is transparent monitoring and reporting to, of course, track progress, incorporate it into the plan, but also allow independent parties, civil society, and others to hold entities accountable to their progress in the roadmap. So these are important elements of the roadmap. Another way of looking at a credible roadmap is what it's trying to achieve, and whether those outcomes are at the right level of and ambitious enough, or whether expectations are being set at the right level for the scope of the roadmap. In Manitoba's exercise, and when you look at public policy setting road mapping work, what's really important and foundational to this is that the outcomes are targeting a favorable, enabling environment. And what that means is that government alone isn't the only actor that is going to be implementing the plan. What they need to do is they need to develop the right environment for all of the other actors: industry, civil society, academia, everyone to come in behind the plan and align their own activities to drive progress. This slide shows some of the key pillars of that enabling environment, and I think it's really useful to think about it in terms of what it means for your business. Like if you are a company that's pursuing a new clean technology that you want to commercialize and deploy into the market, are you seeing the right regulatory environment to be able to do that in Manitoba? Are there barriers? If there are, the roadmap's an opportunity to address those barriers. If you're looking to adopt new technologies, similarly, are there barriers, policy or regulatory barriers that are in the way of doing that? Quentin talked quite a bit about capital and investment, which is really essential in shifting, the flow of finance from conventional technologies to clean tech. So does Manitoba have a favorable environment for that? Can new entrants secure financing compared to conventional technologies that are going to be needed to shift to net zero? Really important factors that in turn influence things like, what we're investing in terms of public infrastructure, as well as how quickly we can bring technologies and new innovations to market. And then the final piece, culture and norms, very important from a business perspective, to be shifting perceptions and really influencing, consumer demand for products. And so how is the roadmap going to be acting on all of those different pillars? It's really important that we feel at BizforClimate, it's really important that the government of Canada, or not government of Canada, the government of Manitoba, the province, is focusing on these pillars in their road mapping exercise. Great. So what does this mean for then, businesses taking action and mobilizing around this consultation process? First thing is there's a role for BizforClimate in this. Derek laid out sort of what we're trying to build with this organization. And I want to focus specifically on sort of the policy advocacy pillar of our work. And this road mapping exercise is a great example of the value that BizforClimate can bring to this. We get this question all the time. I think Derek gets it maybe once or twice a day from people, what does BizforClimate do, right? And so there are 3 different roles that are shown on this slide that I think are really useful for thinking about in terms of the role we can play and the value we can bring to this. One is that, and the ultimate goal here is really for us to be bridging business community with government. That's the ultimate goal here. So on the business facing side, examples like this webinar, right? Helping raise awareness, giving business a voice, and developing consistent and common messages where appropriate that businesses can use with government. Also helping businesses navigate their relationship with government. So that's one area. Second area in the middle is advocating and creating fora for businesses to sit down with government and be able to communicate their needs, barriers, and opportunities that they see in this space. We want to be making sure that there are opportunities for that in this process and others. And then finally, on the government side, BizforClimate as someone who is actively engaging in policy setting activities, both in terms of sharing our expertise on climate and business issues to help shape policies, but also to really encourage government to be more ambitious and to serve as an entity that will hold government accountable for ambitious planning and business smart climate planning. Excellent. So that's the role we can play. And then a final ask for those on the call today, this is what we are really recommending you do in terms of participating in the current consultation period around Manitoba's roadmap. Two things. One, there is an online survey. Please complete it before September 5th, and Dee will be walking you through that. Second, send a written submission in. Both are equally important, and in fact, the written submission is going to be more impactful. To facilitate that, we have a form letter that we have developed, and we will be sending out to those attending this call, along with the slides. That form letter you can use, you can fill in your name and send it in, or you can adjust it as you see fit for your organization. We're trying to make it very simple for people to engage in the process. And the letter contains these key messages that we feel are very useful at this early stage in the net zero roadmap process. First, a signal that the government of Manitoba should be ambitious and be credible, and that business is looking for that in the net zero plan. So a plan that includes many of the hallmarks that I presented earlier. Second, to be strategic, to look at this as much as an environmental and a climate plan, but also an opportunity to pursue economic development objectives, trade objectives, resource development, Indigenous reconciliation, and other activities, and making sure that the government is thinking very broadly about the different ministries that need to be aligned behind this plan, as well as other ongoing policy and programming efforts that are underway. And then finally, sending a strong signal that business is a willing partner in this, that government is not alone, and that the plan should really be working with business and other stakeholders to really catalyze their own action, both through engagement in the process, but also in terms of what kinds of partnerships come out of the plan and how that enables further action as we enter implementation. Excellent. I will pass it back to Derek. Thank you very much, and very happy to pick up more in the Q&A.
And thank you very much, Chris. Tremendous job walking us through, and unpacking a lot of information and really condensing it into a nice, very digestible format. Look forward. We'll continue the conversation afterwards in the Q&A. And again, I see some questions are starting to come in through the chat, but we look forward to picking up on that conversation. So thank you, and we'll see you shortly. So I'd now like to invite my colleague Dee King to come on stage with us here. Dee is the Director of Operations and Communications for BizforClimate. They lead some of our key initiatives connecting business to climate action, including our digital strategy and our social media engagement and our programming and our logistics and the hard work behind putting today's event together. They bring tremendous experience and have been building multiple nonprofits over the past decade. Dee's also a founder and CEO of ZenFry, which is an award-winning interactive studio known for pioneering extended reality, which is virtual reality and augmented reality, and done many projects for museums, cultural institutions, and entertainment platforms. one of the co-founders with us of Biz4Climate and one of the leaders of the organization. And I'd say a true sustainability champion and the one that helps us stay very true to our own climate and sustainability goals and help ensure that we walk the talk when we run programs and do events. So, Dee.
Thank you. All right, so my stuff is nice and easy. It's literally fill out the survey, please and thank you. You can find it on the EngageMB.ca website. So it's separate from all the other government websites. It's a specific website that's just geared to surveys. So if you are not a member, like an account holder with that website, you have to make your own. So when you go to EngageMB.ca and you want to fill out any survey, you have to sign in or create an account. Takes a couple seconds, but once you're in, you only have to do that once for all surveys coming up. After that point, you'll find the roadmap to net zero. It's pretty high up on the list because we have that deadline coming up pretty quickly on September 5th. And there's only 13 questions in it. So some of the questions are split between you. What are you doing as just a person in Manitoba? What's your business, or what should businesses do? And then the lovely long form where we get to be actually creative with our answers. So, in one, it might be, what measures are you currently taking to reduce emissions in your own life? Mine was pretty checked off. There's also like, what are you planning to do? So it's fairly easy just to go through the you section, the personal section, and find out, how to answer those. Business, it gets a little bit more into the nitty gritty. What do you think the role of industry and businesses in Manitoba's transition to net zero? Oh, there's a couple of questions or responses there, but we can get even more in depth in that long form. So there's two ways you can fill out the long form. You can either fill it out in that little, paragraph area, or what's even better is to actually get the letter in to that email address. So I have it up on screen, ccinfo@gov.mb.ca. You'll be emailing any letters to the government through that address. And as Derek and Chris both mentioned, we have that template letter. So feel free to grab that, use it to your liking, and send that in. I will have a full package at the end of this that has the recording with subtitles. I'll have the that template letter and any other key messages or information that you might need to know to fill out the survey efficiently and effectively for your time, because I know we're all so busy and it's only 13 questions, but it could easily get lost in the mix of everything we have to do. So now we have Q&A.
So we've reached the Q&A portion of the of today's webinar. So this is your chance to add some more questions. I see there's a few that have come in through the chat, so we'll make sure we get to those. And I'll just invite my other colleagues to come back and join us here. So feel free to send questions to any one of us or all of us. And let's see. So I'm just looking over at the chat, and I see a couple things have come in. And first of all, thank you for putting out the comments, but I think a shout out to Lori, who's shared a tremendous amount of information, complimentary information and resources in that chat. So thank you very much for being so active on that. One question I see here is about, here's the, there we go. So are Winnipeg political, business, and community owners aware of the new framework within the United Nations to set up direct funds to climate change activities? So there's a link provided there. This is pointing over to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's one of the very long acronyms. That's the organization, or the part of the United Nations organization that leads and oversees and coordinates all of the international and multilateral climate change discussions. So you may often hear in the news about events like COP30 was the most recent. COP30 is coming up. 29 was last year. That's the forum where the famous Paris Accord was negotiated. That's where all the countries at that time in 2016 agreed to come together and work together to reduce global emissions and address climate change, and begin that hard work of globally and nationally through all our countries starting to steer our economies to a net zero framework. So we find ourselves today very much in, continuing on that process. And it's great to highlight they have many great resources available on that website through the links. So I encourage you to check those out. Next up. So I have a question from Linda, a Treaty 5 member, and asking how is this message being relayed to the many First Nations in Manitoba, which is very critical to policy and to voice. Excellent question. And, what I tried to convey at the opening remarks and as part of the land and the treaty acknowledgement was just a little bit of insight into how we're going about thinking about that question, how we can be very mindful of and sensitive to the many ways that this issue impacts First Nations in Manitoba, and ultimately how we can help support ensuring that there is a voice. Our particular role and focus at BizforClimate has been to bring business owners and companies together around the table on this issue and help engage this particular audience. But even within that, about 20 companies as part of the BizforClimate signatories today identify as Indigenous owned or led businesses. And so part of our process as we've been working early on to develop what our strategy and what our approach to advancing policy issues is we organized a roundtable and invited all the Indigenous business signatories to come and provide some input and feedback onto this question. So it's a dialogue we look forward to continuing. I think from my perspective, and I feel free to any of my colleagues to weigh in on this as well, but we certainly welcome the dialogue and encourage you to reach out to us. And if we can help make any connections or facilitate this along the way, we're here to do that. Did anyone else want to respond on any of those?
I think you said it very well.
Yeah, absolutely, Derek. And I think that I guess I'm seeing another question here, but why don't I turn it over to you too, or if you're having a chance to read that that's coming in.
Okay, hang on. Okay, we'll pull up the feel free to finish your thought, Chris. If there's more, we'll just check out this question.
All good. Yeah, go for it.
So here we are. From an ECDEM perspective, as a Manitoba resident, we do and we can do a lot to reduce emissions. However, all reductions go back to the environment every time we have a wildfire season. Yes, it is a terrible impact on Manitobans and quality of life, health, and enjoyment of wonderful but too short summers. Kills business, that need those summer clients, and priority of government should be to prevent, manage wildfires and would prevent a ton of emissions. Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think it goes without saying that this issue is top of mind for us here in Manitoba. And, I was just at a roundtable strategy meeting around this issue, and all the participants were sharing our own sort of stories and lived experiences and talking about the summer. And just sort of overriding this whole issue was the wildfire smoke. And I know myself and my family, it dampened our activity. It limited some of our participation from some kids' sports being canceled early in the season to us just, we're not taking that bike ride. We're not going for that hike. We're not doing these things that, we might have. And I felt it. So issue-wise, a lot of things like a net zero roadmap, emissions reduction, these are all strategies that will ultimately help us to reduce the emissions, which are continue to cause and amplify and sort of worsen or compound the effects and compound the future effects of wildfire. We do know that collectively, globally, we have locked in a certain level of global warming based on historical emissions to date. So part of what we experienced, this summer and going forward is unfortunately with us to stay. But there's an aspect of how much worse and what else can we do about it. And I think you're very right that we also need to be looking at those questions of our resilience. And that factors into questions like our infrastructure and our policy and how we approaching solutions and how are we helping communities, businesses, homeowners, adapt and prepare for some of these new realities going forward. And that also has to be part of the planning and policy mix that we're talking about in climate policy. But I invite my other colleagues to weigh in. I realize I feel like I'm hogging the platform here on the questions.
Does anyone want to jump? I'm off mute.
Yeah, so I guess I'm looking at you, Chris.
No, I think it's really important. It's a good point that we need to be thinking as much about, resilience and responding to the impacts we're seeing as mitigation, and for sure that is an important aspect of climate preparedness. Focusing on the impacts that people are seeing are really important because it does make the issue very tangible to people. So I think that's really important. It's also a way of building a bit more of that range of actors, like making sure people understand there's a health perspective, there's a health element to addressing climate change. It's not just about climate writ large. There are local health impacts associated with both climate impacts, but some of the ways to reduce emissions as well can improve air quality. So there's a lot of interaction here, and I think really emphasizing where there are different groups. Sometimes maybe we talk about like odd bedfellows, but there are certain elements of the climate challenge that really do align with different agendas. And so exploring that's really important part of success in meeting a net zero plan.
Yeah, I would love to dovetail into that. One of the things that we all know when it comes down to how the province dictates policy is unfortunately the idea of the squeaky wheel gets greased. And if we aren't actively engaging and bringing this to top of mind on a recurring basis, unfortunately, these matters will get pushed down on the priority list. So it is so important that we're consistently making known what our priorities are so that these policies get the importance, get put on the list of importance as they should.
Great. So I have a question to maybe put to my colleagues here. With this exercise of the province working to develop a roadmap, how do we work to ensure that this roadmap is not just a government document, but something that people and organizations can feel some ownership of, and something we can get behind?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I think that's it's really important. I think that people can see themselves in the plan for sure, and I'm sure people on the call feel that as well. For me, what matters, I think that there's two different elements. Like there is an internal part of the roadmap, and it goes to some of the things around implementation mechanisms, like the structures that are around the plan within government to really enable it to align different types of planning, policies, and programs that are being developed and that will either impact the plan or opportunities to really achieve what the plan is seeking to achieve. And that's very internal, it's very bureaucratic, and it's very hard to see yourself in that. But it is a very important part of the plan. I think that it's important to recognize that there is sort of an essential element of that kind of nuts and bolts that I think is really important for the public to see, to know that there's some backing there. I think it's really important, by the same token, to not focus exclusively on that. And you really do need to find ways to, and it goes to some of the culture and norm creation, right, in that enabling environment. Like, find ways to change the conversation, as you said at the beginning. Find ways to get people excited about what is happening here, to see opportunities for themselves in it, to feel that they have a part in it. And it's not just lip service. There are important things that people can be doing. And so the plan does need to help people see that to some extent. And I think it's also in terms of how the plan is communicated, which we haven't even gotten into, but that also is a really important part. What is the province saying about the plan? How is that being communicated to people? And what are other partners saying and showing, partners who might be closer to citizen-facing or customer-facing aspects? Those are opportunities to drive home those messages. Quentin, you work with the public, and I know finance is like a big part of this, and people really have questions about where should I be putting my money and how do I support these things. So, I don't know if you have some perspectives on that, but I think finding ways to make that really tangible, like your RRSP can help support things that are aligned with this plan. That's a very direct connection.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. I think at the end of the day, it comes back to how you strategize as a business. I think so often what happens with businesses is that you're just caught up in the day-to-day of life and you're just trying to make sure that operations are afloat. You're pulled in so many different directions. This requires proactivity. So when you're doing your ongoing business planning, these are the considerations that you have to put into the plan. And if you aren't proactively putting this into the plan, unfortunately, you're going to be subject to just receiving, again, whatever the policy dictates, right? It's kind of what I was saying within kind of that intro, why the context matters is that if you aren't a part of the shaping the policy, then you're going to be subject to playing whatever rules that are set out, for better or worse.
We've been sharing some polls today, and one of them actually has a tie on it. What do you see as the biggest challenge for Manitoba in achieving net zero? And we're tied between cost and affordability and political and policy barriers. So they both have 5, unless someone wants to jump in now and dip the scales a little bit. We have that kind of, which is, what do you guys think is kind of leading the charge on there?
I was looking at that, Dee, and I was actually, I also took away that there's a fair amount of support for some of those other things, which I think does underscore
right.
the importance and the challenges of this plan needing to do a lot of different things. So I don't know if folks want to weigh in on that particular question. It's tough, definitely a tough tie to break. I would say.
I'll add a comment from in terms of what we're working on and focused on here at BizforClimate is we're trying to communicate and convey the role that we're playing and how we can work with and help businesses around this. On that poll question, we have the political and policy barriers, tied for the lead, but right behind public awareness and engagement. And those are both 2 critical areas where we're focusing a lot of our energy and a role we're trying to play so that we can have much more awareness and engagement, particularly coming through the business community and mobilizing that, the 99% of the small and medium-sized businesses across Manitoba, which is the backbone of our economy, providing that engagement and collectively working to address those political and policy barriers. And when there's good solutions that ought to be going forward and we can bring forward and we can advise on, we need to speak up collectively and put wind in the sails and make those things happen. And that's going to be the action and the impact that we're working to drive around this. Okay.
I love this next question. We have one from Jack from MEIA.
Oh, great. Okay, Jack. What could we do? What collectively do to get more businesses investing in sustainability, decarbonization, and GHG reductions? MEIA, that's the Manitoba Environmental Industries Association, has been offering programming to provide education training in Manitoba since 2015. But admittedly, it's a challenge to recruit SME participation. So this is one I'll maybe invite and put the challenge back to the group in the chat here. Like, we would welcome any input from those on the line, the business on the line, of what sort of tools or help or advice or program, anything that you think would help you from that perspective. That would be very useful takeaway information that we can share and relate back. And I think collectively, I think that's a nut we're all trying to crack that problem of how do we effectively do more engagement to make that business case. And it's an observation I've been having as I talk to a lot of businesses around this issue, is that not that there's a lack of concern about an issue of climate change, not that there's a lack of awareness of the problem, but it becomes much more difficult to get from one point to the next on this, because there are costs, because there are barriers, because there are time constraints, because there are many, many other competing factors affecting business, of affordability, of economy, of trade and tariffs, et cetera, workforce and labor challenges.
Yeah, and Derek, what other point? I think that's all right, and obviously SMBs face like particularly acute challenges there. I guess I think, and Jack, you would be aware of some of this, that there are some real linkages to just sort of chronic business issues in Canada as well. Like there are some challenges in the sustainability, decarbonization, GHG reduction space, but this is also a story about innovation, technology commercialization in Canada. And we've been historically very weak in some of these areas, right? So solving that puzzle and some of the bigger wheels around how are we encouraging innovation? How are we encouraging things like venture capital, patient capital that'll see some of these Canadian innovations, get to market, right? There's a great op-ed in the Globe and Mail today talking about, building the big infrastructure projects, but making points that we're trailing behind the US in terms of capital investment, and we're not reinvesting as much into Canadian innovation as others in the world. And these are areas, we have a productivity issue in Canada. Solving those bigger problems and directing some of those solutions into the clean tech space it's the same challenge. And so I think these are some of the issues that through BizforClimate, bringing that business perspective and some of those business issues into the climate space allows us to use opportunities like this roadmap to try to solve some of those problems and link them to these broader kind of economic and innovation agendas as well. I think that can be really powerful.
Yeah, that's a great
Great.
note, Chris.
Great stuff.
Sorry, I would just love to connect. I really think a problem that we experience. We often think of the macro level. What we're talking about right now is at the macro. When we're talking about making tangible impact, we also have to think about the micro, talking about individual businesses and what are their specific challenges, and then what can we do as organizations to collaborate to help bridge those gaps. That is inherently what BizforClimate is trying to achieve, above and beyond the policy advocacy piece. But it's working together as organizations, MEIA, as well as BizforClimate and the other wonderful organizations that are providing this education to figure out, okay, as a small business, what are the problems that you're experiencing? And then how do we have a diagnostic framework to help you think about those problems to be able to solve it in the context of climate action, so that again, you're solving the problems that are the constraints, like the economy of it all, the dollars and cents, as well as making sure that the way you structure your operations and systems are in line with best practices relative to climate engagement.
Yeah, coming from like the technology sector, we often feel like we're doing the best out of the rest. That we don't have the manufacturing, we're not building airplanes, we're not contributing to agriculture, we're just using computers and technology without delivering an actual like physical item. And so we go, we have remote offices, we have remote workers, what do we need to do, right? We're doing so well. But there's so much e-waste and all of these little things that are adding up from the technology sector that we really could be cutting in half or more to really reduce down those little bits, those little building blocks really do matter. And what better way than just to like cut those little by little than tackle all of agriculture.
Dee, I love that point, and especially in the tech space, it's something that I hear all the time. But I would actually push you as a tech leader. Given your operational framework, you have the best experience to help other businesses understand what their respective constraints are and how they can be more tech enabled to make sure that they're making more environmentally sensitive choices.
Yes. And one of the points that I always make is that a lot of it is kind of clouded because, I might jump into servers that aren't Canadian. I might jump into technologies and AIs that are far away from my office. And so how do I track all of those emissions? And having some type of framework so that I can go, okay, well, I'm doing these things. Here are the externalities to how I run my business, because they're not happening here, right? Right next to me doesn't mean that they don't exist and they're not affecting the environment.
Well, great stuff, everyone. This is the type of conversation that I think can carry on a lot longer, and we need to do many more of these types of sessions to really unpack the different ways that we can help business through this, and we can help shape the future direction. But we are at time for today's webinar. It goes fast. So I'm going to have a few closing remarks to wrap things up. I will thank my colleagues and presenters for your participation to help us prepare for today's session. And I'm just going to pull up a couple of slides to walk through that. So we'll maybe see you on the other side. Yeah, so we'll move on here. Feel free to jump off as you're ready. So moving forward, just a few quick thank you and comments to the sponsors of BizforClimate. We are a not-for-profit organization, but we are not government funded in what we do. So we are truly a business-led initiative. We're powered by a great group of sponsors and companies who are helping support the cause and the movement. So our shout out to them. This would not be possible without that support and investment. And we have a great and growing number of partners who are working with us on how we move forward this issue. So thanks to all of you. Jack with MEIA, thanks for being here today, and to others who might be on the line. We really appreciate working with you. And, you know, as we continue to communicate and work together on this, I'm convinced we're only going to increase our input. Last reminder, kind of the takeaway calls to action for today: to complete the survey. The link was shared in this. It will be in the follow-up email, and we've been circulating it on our website and through our social media, as have many of our partners, because this really is a critical time and opportunity to participate in that. We encourage the written submission to add your personal touch and to add that voice of business, and why this matters to you as a business and why you support this as a business owner is key. And 3, stay tuned. There's going to be more opportunities like this. We'll start to do more webinars and roundtable discussions and working groups to bring you together, and we want to get more of that input, and we want to be working together around this whole issue. I did see that there's quite a few resources shared in the chat and lots of contributions. So I'd encourage us, if we take this offline and if there's everything you want to share with the group, feel free to tag us. We're at BizforClimate on LinkedIn. That's a great way we can share resources, and we'll help circulate that and push it out to the network. So with that, we thank you all. Thank you for participating, and we shall close the seminar and send the info to you after the fact. Thanks again. Have a great day.